Welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chainy podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and today we are talking to Nilay from Arvist. He is the CEO and founder, and I've seen them at more than one conference, so I felt it was just about time I actually get him on the podcast and ask him a little bit about what the inspiration was for Arvist and what the mission is and what they're trying to accomplish. So Nilay, welcome to the Supply Chainy podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more of your background and how we got to this conversation today?
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for having me, first of all, Nathan.
Certainly.
It's a pleasure. I've heard a lot about the Supply Chainy podcast, and you are a popular voice on my LinkedIn feed. So great to be here. Once again, Nilay Parikh here. I'm the founder and CEO at Arvist. My background, I'm a first-gen immigrant. I moved to the United States about 12 years ago now. I came here for my master's in aerospace engineering at the University of Southern California, USC. So was in Southern California for about 6 years after my graduation as well. Was working in the advanced or additive manufacturing space for a bit. So 3D printing for the normal audience. It was cool at start. My job was a really fun one. It was with a Danish manufacturing company that I worked for. It's a large, multi-billion-dollar enterprise, family-owned business. And my role was to set up these centers of excellence across their supply chain. So at their headquarters in Denmark, in India, China, Germany, in the US. So it's moving every 6 months, going to these new sites, setting these labs up, and bringing in a lot of different technology solutions to see what works, what doesn't work, and then translate it to the actual warehousing, logistics, and manufacturing floor. So all in all, I had a chance to visit a lot of warehouses, right, and manufacturing locations around the world. And that's where the first, sort of seeds of Arvist inspiration came from.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Can we dig in a little bit more into your background, into your upbringing, when you were growing up? What did you think you wanted to be? We all kind of had those childhood dreams. What was yours?
Well, I had two. One was to be, I just call it a train driver.
Okay.
I just wanted to ride trains. It was such a cool thing. I thought it was the most fun thing to do in the world. As I grew up, I wanted to then, the tastes changed. I wanted to then design cars, which in my naivety, I thought it was, you just had to go to art school and not really a mechanical engineering school. So I thought I was, I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to do arts and I'm going to design cars. But then I just realized that that's just the outside, right? If you actually want to build cars, that's not how you go. And that's what my trajectory took me into mechanical engineering school. And then from there on, and I hated math for all my life, right? Wow. And math never left me. So from mechanical, I decided to jump into aerospace because taste refined from mechanical engineering. I was actually had the chance to fulfill my dream of building and designing a race car. I was part of the Formula SAE team, FSAE, and my undergrad, that's where I was part of the aerodynamics team and got into, more of the aerospace side of things. Continued that when I came to USC, I was part of the USC's FSAE team as well. Now, fun fact, we were one of the first teams from India to go out and compete in FSA Italy. So we took our built race car over there and actually brought it out to the world. So that was a fun experience. One of the first times that got a chance to go out, experience different cultures, work with, different teams from around the world. But go ahead.
So, and that must have been a great experience for when you were later on in your career and you were setting up these centers of excellence all around the world. Mm-hmm. You were already kind of used to this a little bit.
A little bit, yes. Excellent. Excellent question. And that's what was the inspiration of taking this job because I had that taste of working in international culture and wanted to explore it more. And that's really eye-opening on how different cultures operate, how people work in different areas. And you're in supply chain, so you know how the problems across the world are pretty much the same. So even if we are producing different parts in different countries and different work environments, you're still facing all the same issues which you might face in a manufacturing or warehousing floor here in the US.
Give us, if you could, a quick primer on additive manufacturing, 3D printing, before we kind of dive into maybe the audio video world.
Absolutely. So additive manufacturing is a fascinating industry. I got into it during my master's. I was working with on a research project where we were actually doing 4D printing. The fourth dimension being time. So we were
Okay.
producing components which, just for example, let's say it's an origami shape that you print out, and then when it's exposed to certain environments, let's say temperature or humidity or certain conditions, it folds and actually creates that shape in the future, right? So the applications for that are
Yeah.
enormous. Think about like a drug, right, which you ingest, and only when it's exposed to a certain virus or a bacteria or a cancerous cell in your body, it opens up and exposes. Otherwise, it just passes through. So you're not exposed to drugs without, unintended side effects.
Hmm.
So that was the idea. That's how I got into from the reverse side. Went from 4D printing, then realized that's like a far off, still R&D phase. 3D printing was becoming just more common right about 2012, 2013 timeframe, and that's when I got into the industry.
Okay. Okay. I got to touch on 3D printing just a bit in
Mm-hmm.
a role at Texas Instruments where we had all the
Right.
I had all the replacement parts for all of the tooling for the
Yep.
semiconductor fabs, and some of these parts were really expensive and you only rarely needed them, and so it didn't make sense to stock them. And so
Correct.
there's this idea of having inventory of just the raw materials and the
Mm-hmm.
coding to be able to print new parts when necessary. And as we were having that conversation, I thought that was such a smart way to have, everyone calls it a resilient supply chain, right? And
Yep.
I've been on some podcasts where people have asked, well, how do we build a resilient supply chain? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, just, create the product at the latest point possible in the supply chains and build what you need when you need it. That's a great way to build a resilient supply chain. But 3D printing
Absolutely.
just seems like it never went mainstream. It's never really picked up a huge amount of traction. Do you have any thoughts on that? Again, before we jump into what your real expertise is in now.
Yeah, no, I actually totally agree with your statement over there. When I was working actively in the additive manufacturing space, and I keep referring it to as additive because people in the additive world never liked it being called 3D printing, so it got kind of stuck.
Okay, okay, I
Because 3D
gotcha.
printing is like hobbyist, additive manufacturing is like the application you just described.
Yeah.
It was always something like an inside joke that it's a solution looking for a problem. There's
Uh,
some really, really great additive manufacturing technologies out there, different kinds of materials, stuff that you can do, but it never really caught mainstream because everyone was trying to replicate manufacturing, right? Instead of going towards exactly the use cases like you mentioned, right? Just in time for specialized components. If you see, Aerospace has adapted that technology very well. You go to Formula One racing, it has adapted it. Healthcare,
uh,
I think at this point, about 80 to 90% of hearing aids around the world are 3D printed or additively manufactured. A lot of your
okay.
dental implants are additively manufactured, right? So that it has, if people just focused on the applications which required this special kind of technology, instead of just trying to plaster it across the board, it would have been much more successful. And there's still a lot of people in this industry who are trying to make that happen. And I think it's a good analogy for the artificial intelligence space that we are in right now as well. Master it across the board. Like, don't try to enforce. I don't want my toothbrush AI powered, right? Like, there's absolutely zero need for that, and that really dilutes the message for what a technology is capable of doing.
That's a great point. I remember there being a small point in time when additive manufacturing, as it was coming out and really becoming a buzzword. And I was in supply chain. I was early in my career, and I was for a moment worried that the need to move goods and materials in a supply chain type of fashion would be diminished because all we would need to do is move raw pet pellets
Files.
and whatever around. And I was thinking I need to create the solution. I want to create a website that
Yeah.
has the plans to build everything, the supply chain to go buy your raw products, and the printers themselves. And then I can stay relevant because the whole supply chain is going to just turn into 3D printing, and we're never going to need to buy things from a store or online or anything like that. It's going to take over the world. And it was the same similar type of feeling that people have with AI right now, of AI
Yeah.
maybe taking their jobs.
Yep.
And it's so funny to be 10 years later down the road and be like, well, that was a moment in time.
Right.
Well, we all moved on, and now AI is kind of that new possible game-changing type of technology.
For
Um,
sure.
but I feel like what you do today and doing with what you're doing with Arvist, I feel like there is an AI component maybe in there. Or can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing with Arvist?
Absolutely, yeah. So yes, AI is a small component. We are an artificial intelligence company. Before it became, this buzzword in the last 1 or 2 years, if you will.
Uh-huh.
We're specifically focused on the computer vision aspect of artificial intelligence, and I'll go into more details about that later.
Mm-hmm.
But what we are essentially doing with Arvist, and going back to the origin story, right? The idea for Arvist came about from the fact that when I was setting up these centers of excellence, right, across the world, a lot of the technology out there is hardware dependent, and you can bring in and solve most of the problems with a lot of technology out there, from automation, IoT devices, wearables, sensors, and whatnot. The problem in the supply chain world is we are dependent on a workforce which churns way more often than your regular, maybe a lab environment workforce. Things work when it's controlled, right? Everything works perfectly. As soon as you take it out on a 1 million square foot warehouse or on a 500,000 square foot assembly line with manufacturing operations going on, it starts breaking down. All right. And that was the whole idea with Arvist, that, hey, there's a lot of data available in these environments already, whether it's your ERP systems, warehouse management systems, and on the flip side, your barcode scanners, your security cameras, cell phones, tablets. There's like ways to collect data, and there's already a lot of existing data. How can we leverage what already exists,
Yeah.
and help drive automation or insights, or at least help companies take that steps towards automation, right? Not everyone has the budgets of Amazon and Walmart's and DHL to just go in and throw, millions of dollars on experimental technologies to see what works, what does not work. And that was the whole idea. And so again, it was a very evident problem that we were trying to solve for, and computer vision / artificial intelligence just happened to be the right tool to solve for that. And sort of also was a good timing in the sense that technology was just getting to that maturity level. If you seen the Gartner's hype cycle curve, computer vision on the AI hype cycle is on the most mature side of things, because it has been around for way longer than a lot of your large language model level technology.
Can you describe kind of a practical use case here? Can you
Mhm.
maybe tell a before situation where a facility or an operation had a need or had a problem, and how you were able to address it, and kind of break it down into simple terms for us?
Absolutely, yeah. So some of the major components of what we are solving for with Arvist are quality control and safety and compliance. Right? So we're solving for those two, specifically in warehousing, logistics, distribution center operations. We can do the same in manufacturing, but we haven't just gone there from a resource constraint perspective as an early stage startup.
Sure.
So just to give you a quick couple of examples, right? How we have solved for problems. One is with a company which had a receiving dock where they were bringing in pallets. Their workers were incentivized, obviously, like everywhere else, on unloading the trucks as fast as possible, right? So what would happen is they would unload the trucks, they would take the pallets, put it out in their, racks and aisles. And then the time came for shipment, 10, 15, 20 days later, whenever they got the order, and they would send it, take it out, and they would see the product was either damaged or they did not see it was damaged and they shipped out. Then they would get a chargeback or claim from their end customer.
Yeah.
Now, this, in a lot of cases, was the fact that before they received the product, it was already damaged, but no one did a QC check when it was at an inbound. Right? Once you sign your BOL, then you own the product, right? And you can't go around claiming anyone downstream in the supply chain that, hey, I got damaged product. In
Correct.
their case, it was at the loading docks itself. We repositioned a couple of their security cameras on their shrink wrap stations, in fact. And when the pallets arrived, we were able to give 2 spins on the shrink wrap, get insights on all the products that are arriving, check for any damages, and inform them in real time if you need to accept the products or the pallets or not. They were able to save, they are currently saving almost $30,000 to $35,000 a month, right? Given pricing of the product, their ROI was less than a month for them, right?
Mhm.
Not just important from pricing's perspective, this was just a cost of doing business for them. They just assumed that they would lose about 7 to 8 pallets every month because they would find it out later on. So they were just accounting for that, cost. Now, you and I both work in this industry, right? This is a really, really small profit margin industry. Imagine suddenly you're saving $360,000 a year, and it's a small, medium-sized warehouse facility. That's directly affecting your bottom line.
Yeah.
Right? And another example of, again, on the quality side is at the outbound. Right, one of our customers, like a lot of warehousing operations, the normal process is someone prints out the manifest from their WMS, goes around, does a QC check of the products which are being shipped out. They make sure it's correct. If not, then they find a forklift driver to replace, bring them new products, take it back, and put that information in the WMS, right? In our case, we were able to reduce the time for per pallet inspection from about 3 to 4 minutes to 10 to 20 seconds. Now, they are moving 1,500 pallets a week, right? So just if you do the multiplication, it's immense savings, not just from a cost and time perspective, but customer satisfaction perspective. Let them call you after 10 days, 15 days, like, hey, I got the wrong products, I got the wrong shipment. You're like, hey, here's the report, right? We send out the correct products, damage-free at this time, this date, and there's no discussion points, right? You're just saving a lot of future paperwork as well.
Gotcha. It's, to me, having built and run warehouses and distribution centers, it sounds amazing. And if I'm kind of putting into terms, it seems like where there was zero QC kind of really happening on an inbound, this is kind of an easy way to add a layer of QC in there. And for people who are already doing QC, it's a way to do it faster and more efficiently.
Absolutely.
And so it's the gateway drug into having a proper QC process, or it can enhance an existing one to make it better. Or obviously kind of safeguard and CYA your operation as you're outbounding something to say that you have loaded, in full and damage-free on the outbound side. So you can reduce your claims of you were at fault for some damage on the outbound. How about that was a lot of QC, I guess, that we were solving for. How about a safety sort of use case?
Yeah, on the safety and compliance side, there's a lot of different examples, not like direct ROIs, but just to show you or explain some ways people are using computer vision, right? So one is on a food and beverage customer. They were moving, it was a refrigerated freezer, temperature controlled warehouse. So they would move the pallets out of the freezer and then have it in the temperature control zone before it's loaded up in the trucks, right? Now there's a limit to how much time a pallet can stay outside before things start getting spoiled, right? But again, your warehouse workers, forklift drivers, they're optimizing their paths and their routes, right? So they'll bring everything out from the freezer and store it in the temp control zone. And then it's like, okay, then I'll put everything in the trucks. We were able to give assessments immediately that, hey, this pallet was here for more than 40 minutes. The chances of that products getting spoiled might be higher than the ones that you just brought in. So again, making sure that the compliance for, let's say, food and beverage, but also like pharma, becomes way more easier. Another thing that we are doing is we have integrated LLMs into our platform. So what I mean by that, right? One of the most boring parts of any quality or safety incident or accident, something that happens, is the paperwork that follows, right? You have to file an internal incident report. You have to file an
You are
OSHA
about
report.
to blow my mind right now, I think. Please continue.
Absolutely. So get ready for that. So what we do is our LLM actually looks at our computer vision detections and models and fills out those forms and creates the descriptions and makes it ready for the safety manager or the operations manager to approve it. Right, so we don't do any facial recognition or identity recognition, so they still need to put in the names of people involved. But everything else is filled out. You sign off and you send it off, right? You're saving like 2 or 3 hours of paperwork, whether it's FDA regulations, OSHA compliance, or even just internal HR reporting. It's all taken care of. Right. So again, taking it a step forward from just computer vision, AI analytics, but to putting it into your process workflows is what we are really striving for.
Wow. Yeah, that was mind blowing. That was pretty nice. Just as you started to say that, I just jumped to right where that was about to go, and it was amazing. Last night I was messing around. I really like this product called Smartsheet.
Uh-huh.
And, it's like Excel on steroids. And I was messing around for, I've got a client. We were kind of maybe thinking about using it to do some project management. And I hadn't been in it in a while. And I was messing around with some cells, and a little thing popped up that said, do you need to enter a formula? Just describe the formula that you want to create. Just describe it, right? LLM,
Yeah,
and we will create the actual formula for you. And I was, my goodness, that was
that's
amazing.
awesome. Yeah.
So, it's the power that, the efficiency and kind of, it does do a lot of thinking for us. It reduces the amount of brain power that we as workers have to exert, for sure. But it enables everyone to be so much more efficient and effective
Right.
in their jobs. Let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of building a business. Is Arvist your first take at entrepreneurship and building a company?
It is my first take. Yes, it's my first rodeo. And so in the last 2+ years, I've made pretty much all the mistakes in the book. So I can very much tell you what all not to do.
The perfect segue. That's typically one of the questions I always ask everyone is what's maybe one of those big blunders that you made that you can share that may help someone else to avoid making the same mistake if they're listening.
Okay, so let's see, which one should I pick? I think the biggest mistake that I made is the fact that we didn't go into a customer discovery before starting to build the product. And let me explain. Now it's very obvious in hindsight. Right? Like, okay, are you stupid? Why did you do customer discovery, right? But hey, I was a first-time founder. I came from a corporate setting and corporate world. I felt like I saw a problem in the field, and there was a technology which could solve it. It's like no-brainer. This is gonna work. So we built out proof of concept, MVP level of product. We bootstrapped it. So I put in my own money
Very
to
nice.
do that.
Yeah.
And we had and everyone likes a free pilot. So we got a couple of free pilots and stuff going. So we thought we had something. Like everyone was appreciative of what we were trying to solve for. And this was just on the safety and compliance, mostly just the safety side of the things. And after that, we got into a few like accelerator programs. I got exposed to the tech community, startup founders, and builders in general. And then realized this entire customer discovery process, which should have preceded.
Yeah.
Which I thought, okay, no, we skipped that. It's fine. Right? We are on a good track. But eventually, when we started selling the product, it was very, very hard to actually sell it. Right? People were not buying it. They thought it was a nice to have, not a real need to have. And it varies from industry to industry. But let's say you're moving chemical weapons or something, safety is paramount. But if you're moving like e-commerce T-shirts, it's not like the biggest issue, right? It's not something that you face on a day-to-day basis. You have other problems to worry about. So that was eye-opening. We went back to the drawing table, and then I went and talked to almost 60 different executives, operations managers, operations leaders, CEOs about their problems and what we were solving for. And almost 100% of them told me about the problems they were facing on the quality control, on the compliance side, more than the safety side of things, right? And that's when we decided not to pivot, because we had good solutions developed for safety, but add that quality control and compliance piece to our platform. And now overall, it has become a way more robust way to go and approach a customer that, hey, we have all these solutions. You don't have to buy 3 different softwares to solve for this, right? So I think anyone who's planning to start a business out there, the biggest advice is go out and validate your problem. Don't talk to your friends and family or people that because they're going to give you what you want to hear. Go out and talk to random people and tell them it's off record. Everyone wants to share their problems, right? If someone's willing to solve a problem for me, like, why wouldn't I share my problems? Go out and talk first before you jump head first.
That makes sense. It sounds, the story that you started to kind of tell there sounds like the typical Y Combinator sort of person who goes into Y Combinator with an idea and pivots within a few months and finds an actual real need in the market and builds a totally different tool, but has that discovery process there that enables them to have that realization.
Absolutely.
What about one of the things that you think you're doing right? So let's flip that where we've made a mistake. Let's flip that coin. And What's something that you think you've done right that allowed you to, extend your business and go beyond the 2 years that an average company exists or whatnot? What do you think is enabling that success?
I think it's at the early stages, team and the people that you have on board is extremely critical. And that again will go back to the mistakes I made. We had a very different looking team when we started the company versus what it is now. And I was fortunate and very deliberate on who we hired after our first sort of, I wouldn't call it a debacle, but all the learning experience in the first year of the business. And then the team that we have right now is really proficient. You need the right mindset when you are in the startup where things change, where people have to take a lot of ownership, and you have to not only listen to customers, you have to listen to investors and the market trends. There's a lot of moving parts, and you have to be very, very flexible and adaptable in your approach, right? And so finding those right people and talent is extremely critical. We were building a very deep technical software for an industry which is not very technical, right? Yep. So it required that balance that, hey, we have to go and create the easiest looking solution while we are solving a very hard problem, right? These on surface look very easy, but they are very hard problems to solve. So having a deep technical bench, but still being able to create the solutions, I think I'm very fortunate to have an amazing team, and which is why we are moving at the speed which we are. Like 2024, we have had most progress like in the last 11 months.
Excellent.
Deploying in 11 locations. We have a software which works phenomenally, and we're making a lot of strides. And that all happens when you have the right team in place, right? I don't have to worry about the product. I know our CTO is going to take care of it. I can just go out and, talk to the customers. And if I have to do both, then it will never move the needle.
Sure. That scaling factor. You did say investors a while ago, and earlier you said bootstrapping. So what's the kind of the picture there within Arvist from a finance perspective?
Yeah, so we initially bootstrapped the company. My idea was I want to get to at least one paying customer before we go out and raise any kind of capital.
Okay.
And because one of my mentors always told me a business is real only when it makes money from customers. Right. And so that's something that I hold very true even today. Investor money is used to fuel the growth, not to run the company. Right. And that's how, and everyone should look at it, because otherwise you're always in the doom loop of the company. So the idea is always put customers first. So we bootstrapped till we had the first paying customers. We had validation that, hey, someone's actually buying this. Right. And then we went out, raised venture capital last fall. And so, we are VC backed at this time.
That's excellent. Good for you. Can we talk a little bit about the technical nature for a moment on just the cameras, lighting, and sort of the computer vision in the background?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, we connect with any kind of existing camera infrastructure. It does require us to have an RTSP streaming protocol, which means that they are IP-based cameras, right? So anything installed in the last 10 years suffices that criteria. We don't usually like working with a lot of Wi-Fi based cameras. We can work with it. However, just from the nature of warehouses, right, with how many metal racks and things can be in place, it can distort camera functionality. There's two kinds of customers, right? Everyone has cameras these days. So that's been like a easier problem than we anticipated. However, there's two levels of customers. One who puts in camera just for the heck of it to scare their employees, if you will. These are like super cheap Amazon bought cameras, $40, and you can barely see anything. It's like grainy, pixelated pictures. And the second level is, the decent enough cameras. So anything that you put on a security camera level is good enough for us to get insights from. Now, it really depends on what kind of analytics we are looking for, right? When I talked about the compliance around pallets being outside in particular zones, you can have a camera far away, not a really good quality data stream. And we can still detect that, hey, there's a pallet, it's been out here for a certain amount of time. If we want to do a quality check for damages on boxes, expiration dates, things like that, you need a better resolution camera, which is repositioned in a location where we can have good visibility. So we do support our customers in identifying the right locations or right kind of infrastructure, put them in touch with our partners if they don't have cameras as well. But the idea is, as far as we can leverage what already exists, we want to do that.
Gotcha. I've talked with security camera companies that have some logic and seems like computer vision built into their security sort of camera interface. One that I talked to gave me an example of being able to use facial recognition and being able to tell what employees were on site and when.
Yeah.
And you were able to Google, or not go, that's the generic term now, search and say, find me all frames that have a red sweater in it, because we think someone in a red sweater walked on the dock and stole something. So go find all those frames and find them for me. Can you talk a little bit about the user interface and maybe some of the searchability and that sort of part of your product?
Absolutely, yeah. So you're very much right. There's even the newer camera companies are coming up with a lot of analytics built in to their camera systems, which is very helpful because we can bring in that data without us doing the detection, right? So just to give you an example, if I want to detect a pallet which fell down from a forklift while it was carrying, I would have to first detect, just from a technical speak, right? First detect a forklift. I would then have to detect a pallet. I would also have to detect, people around it, identify the situation, and then get some context from WMS around which pallet fell down, right? Now, if the camera has already those things recognized, then it becomes easy for us to pull the other remaining pieces and join that data in. So it is actually a very helpful tool that analytics are coming in as built in some of these camera systems. Now, they are mostly focused on the security aspect of it, right? Just like you described, someone entered with a red sweater, after hours. Those are things that we are capable of doing. We just choose to focus on the actual logistics, warehousing, supply chain problems, because that's where our skill set is. And we want to play with the camera manufacturers on exactly that, right? So we don't want to create a security solution and compete with the camera manufacturers. That's not a good strategy for either of them. And also, they are limited by how much analytics they can provide because they are dependent on their cameras. We are camera agnostic. So we can have data coming in from a lot of different camera manufacturers and use that to drive more robust insights, like not keeping it at a high level generic stuff like, hey, humans or forklifts or stuff like that.
Gotcha. One question that I try to ask folks is directed for the students and the early career folks out there. And, understanding that you are playing in the business sandbox a lot these days, but your education and such was in, in mechanical engineering and the engineering field. If you were talking to your younger self, would you stay on the engineering track and kind of approach building a business from the engineering side? Or do you kind of wish you had a business background? Or do you feel like you've been able to upskill yourself and familiarize yourself enough with investment terms and business sort of things? What's your suggestion there? Any words of advice?
Yeah, so if I have very strong opinions on that side of things, especially I'll talk about it in a second about supply chain startups in general. But if I had to give myself some advice early on, would be to join an early stage startup. I never had a chance to do that, or I never choose to do that. That career path never appeared for me. I was always in like bigger corporate environments. So if I had to give someone an advice, if you want to eventually start a business, join a startup. Right? Whether it's an internship, whether it's your first job, get into, and not like some people call Uber a startup. That's not that startup, right? Like early stage startup, pre-Series A startup is where you should join if you want to learn the inner workings, right, of how everything works. I did learn everything on the job, accelerators, and there's a lot of knowledge and information available, online. So business school is not a necessity at all to start a company. I'm not saying that MBA and other business degrees are not important. They are if you want to go into a business role in a corporate environment. Absolutely critical. But to start a company, there's a lot of information out there and a lot of people who are willing to help you as well. On the engineering side of things, if you were to start, if anyone wants to start a company in supply chain and logistics, I get this question a lot, especially in the Chicago area. If I'm on a panel at DePaul or UIC or something like that, like, how I want to start a supply chain company. It's like, go and work in a warehouse, go and work at a freight brokerage,
Yeah, I
go
like
and
it.
work at a port. You cannot solve for an industry which you don't understand the inner workings of. And this is critical for, let's say, supply chain, for healthcare, for manufacturing, for aerospace, right? You cannot just start a company without understanding how it works and what are the problems people are facing, because it's very different from a outsider's perspective. Actually, going to a warehouse, the problems are very, very different. But that's, I mean, if you're building a app or something for social media or the dating or something like that, that's fine. You can go out, build a company. It's a good shot. But if you're going into a technical field, get working in that industry, even if you don't have a degree in that space.
I give similar advice to students who say, hey, I'm studying supply chain and logistics. How do I put my resume at the top of the pile? And I basically say, quit your job at Starbucks and go work in a warehouse, drive a forklift, pick orders, whatever it is. You're going to make about the same amount of money, and you're going to get real, like in the weeds, real experience. That's going to move you to the top of that paid internship stack or that full-time career in the space. Just get in it, right? As soon as you can. And then the other one, that kind of what you were just referring to here, is it reminds me of the concept of having a degree in entrepreneurship. And the school that I went to had this degree, and I always kind of pondered on it, and it kind of felt like, okay, sure, the mechanics of building a business, but you actually need to have some expertise in something to build that business on. Like, what problem are you going to go solve? And you need to be an expert at that.
Yep.
And then build a business that solves it.
Right.
So it's a little, I like your approach of that. You need to go out and find what the real problem is and have some expertise in it. And the business part, you have mentors, you have investors, you have people that you can help come around you to help build the business part of
you
the
can
business.
have the perfect pitch with everything laid out according to your business goals, like an idea, and then it still doesn't resonate with anyone because you don't know how to actually pitch when someone's in front of you. Right? It's a very different storytelling, combination of problem, solution, and that just comes on the job. Right? You guys just got to start.
Yeah. Hey, well, this was an excellent chat. I really appreciated hearing a little bit about your background, your education, your time in additive manufacturing, and how you kind of
You're
came
never
up with
gonna use 3D printing now, right?
I'm not gonna stoop so low as to call it just 3D printing. So I appreciate it. That's been one of the big takeaways for me today. But thank you for coming on and sharing some of your expertise and experience with us. Any last words for the folks listening in today?
Well, thank you very much for having me, allowing me to share my story and experience over here. If you're planning to start a company, you need some advice. I said there's a lot of resources available outside and elsewhere, but I'm available as well. Happy to help anyone starting off in the supply chain journey. Always love working with founders, so you can reach me on my LinkedIn or you visit our website, Arvist.AI, and reach out to me. Happy to be of any resource, AI or supply chain.